they'll come for him. They'll come for all of us. They will make sure that the American people don't have another opportunity that we have right now to try to root out all the corruption. We either get it done in President Trump's term right now, or we lose our republic. We won't be able to recover from it if we don't get some key decisions and some key landmark accountability in this first term.
Welcome to Going Rogue with Lara Logan. This is going to be an exciting episode because I have a woman who, if I can say it, Christina, I think we are cut from the same cloth. A woman who doesn't mince her words, who isn't afraid of the truth, and who has forged ahead based on principle, integrity, hard work, courage, and being willing to outwork and outsmart her enemies, right? So, Christina Bobb, you are best known for being President Donald Trump's attorney during the Mar-a-Lago raid. In fact, you have a book coming out about that, which I want to hear more about from you. And now you're an attorney at Judicial Watch, which has done extraordinary work on so many fronts, really an important organization for this country. So you are not only smart, you're beautiful. I can say that because you're a woman. And you and I were just recently at an event together in Vegas, and I was just so impressed by you that I couldn't wait to get you on the show. So thank you so much for joining us. Your book, I believe, is called Defiant: Inside the Mar-a-Lago Raid.
Yes, ma'am. It's out September 9th, and President Trump actually did the forward for it. So I'm so excited for folks to get a special note from him and to actually see what actually happened, the truth about what went down. Okay, so this is a subject that's very much in the news right now because obviously under the Trump administration, John Bolton was just raided, and of course the media and all the Democratic operatives and all their patsies and little puppets all across the news are all trying to scream foul and say retribution and all the rest of it. But you are uniquely positioned actually to speak to this not just as an attorney, but an attorney that was involved in the Mar-a-Lago raid and on site, right? Not in the building, but on the site at the time. Yeah, absolutely. I was President Trump's custodian of records for Mar-a-Lago. The defense team, President Trump had his defense team that was handling the case, and they needed someone to act as the custodian of records. So they brought me in for that. So I met with the Department of Justice and FBI about 2 months prior to the raid. You know, the whole story, all of this is in the book. I give you the text messages, the emails, the whole thing. But I met with them about 2 months before with the defense team. Next thing you know, they're raiding Mar-a-Lago, and the whole thing reeked. It was absolutely horrid. They never had probable cause. They had to go to a judge who was conflicted out by his own admission, was conflicted out just weeks before. I want to say like 6 weeks before, he had said that he was conflicted from the Trump-Clinton case because he was not able to be impartial. Well, then suddenly 6 weeks later or whatever it was, he's suddenly able to be partial and grant a search warrant for a raid of Mar-a-Lago on an affidavit that was untruthful. They lied in the affidavit. They didn't provide all of the facts and information. President Trump joined our meeting for a few minutes, before 2 months prior to the raid. He was very open and transparent. Everything about this absolutely reeked.
Why are so many young people struggling to have babies today? Birth rates in the US are at record lows, and that's partly because testosterone levels are dropping all the time. According to some studies, T levels are roughly half of what they were 50 years ago. And if we don't reverse this trend, we could be looking at population collapse. And it's why we partnered with Chalk. They're a Patriot-owned supplement company, and their mission is to save mankind from extinction. They have something called the Male Vitality Stack, and it's been shown in clinical trials to boost your free testosterone by 87% in just 21 days. That is not just a statistic. You will feel it. And ladies, you'll be pleased to know it's not just for men. The Female Vitality Stack addresses just about every complaint a woman can have: stress, mood, hormones, energy, and focus. And it'll even help you keep up with your man. So go to chalk.com and use code LARA for 17.76% off your subscription. Cancel anytime. Or you can also call 50CHOQ3000 and tell them Lara sent you. And that was Judge. Remind
Reinhardt.
everybody what his name is so that people can remember who the traitors are.
Yeah, Bruce Reinhardt. You can look it up. He recused himself from the Trump-Clinton case because he said he couldn't be impartial, and then he granted the warrant.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. These judges are going to have their own reckoning. So what was it? What was the predicate in those meetings when you were meeting with the Department of Justice? What was their justification? What were they saying was the issue there?
They were never particularly clear on it, at least not with me. Now, the defense team was running point on the defense aspect of it. I was just the custodian of records. So, but in my meetings with them, they just wanted any classified documents that Donald Trump had. The problem that they had was that the Presidential Records Act says that it's the president and only the president who determines what he takes with him when he leaves the White House and what he leaves behind. And the only opinion that has ever come out on that case is Judicial Watch versus NARA. I'm proud to be at Judicial Watch now, but this was before my time. This was back in 2012 when they were challenging the Clinton sock drawer case, where Bill Clinton had taken supposedly classified material and hidden it in his sock drawer at home. And Judicial Watch was trying to get access to it, saying he never should have taken that material. And the judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who was an Obama appointee, came down and said, it's the president and only the president who gets to make that decision. Not even the archivist, NARA, the National Archives and Record Administration, not even NARA can tell the president what he has to keep or what he has to return. And so when they were saying they wanted classified materials back, everyone was kind of like, what are you talking about? You don't have the right to tell the president what he can keep and what he can take. So it was never, at least in my experience with it, and I was certainly not the only one engaging with them, but it was never a concern of a real crime. Yeah, they had a grand jury subpoena, so obviously they'd opened a grand jury, but for what? President Trump is lawfully in possession of these records, so what is it that you want? So it was very kind of like, what do you need? You can see whatever you want, was really our response and the president's response, and he said that to their faces. And, they came down to Mar-a-Lago, we had our meeting, we said, is there anything else you need? What do you want? And they were like, no, this is good, thank you.
And who was there? Who are these people sitting at the table?
So Jay Bratt was the lead prosecutor. He was there. And then there were 3 FBI agents that I don't think have been named publicly. So I don't want to throw their names out just for their own privacy. But yeah, it was 3 FBI agents and the DOJ lawyer that were there. And next thing we know, the place was raided. So
did that come as a shock to you?
Yes, it was a shock to everybody. Nobody saw. We thought we had been incredibly accommodating. We said, is there anything else you need? And they said no. We're like, okay, oh, that was weird, but great,
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was an incredible shock.
How did you find out?
I received a call from the defense attorney that was handling the case. Oh, this is the part that I think is very interesting. I don't think it was well covered at the time, probably because it doesn't make them look good. But the whole case, the Mar-a-Lago case, was supposed to be a Washington, D.C. case. This was never intended to be an obstruction of justice case in Florida. They always intended to bring charges against Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. And the reason I know that was because the grand jury was in Washington, D.C. I lived in Florida, worked in Florida, met with President Trump in Florida, worked for him in Florida, signed for the documents in Florida, met with the Department of Justice and the FBI in Florida, was present at the raid in Florida. Yeah, when I was compelled to testify, I had to go to Washington, D.C. And I kept asking my lawyers, why am I going to D.C.? This all took place in Florida. Like, what are we doing in D.C.? It appears that they were trying to create some type of Hillary Clinton email-esque espionage matter against Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. And even after they raided Mar-a-Lago, they did not have enough to even get an indictment in Washington, D.C. They literally had nothing. But they were still trying to forge ahead and they were coming up short. So they were forced to transition down to Florida and open a case down there.
Find a corrupt judge to go along with it.
Well, Aline Cannon, I think, actually did a good job. Oh, you mean for the grand jury?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they opened a new grand jury in Florida. They get an indictment down there for obstruction of justice. There's a handful of basically throwaway charges. But they had to do that because by that point, they'd already raided Mar-a-Lago and everybody was looking at them going, why the heck did you raid Mar-a-Lago? And they're like, oh, we don't know. And, they were like kind of caught cold feet. This is hindsight, right? At the time, none of us knew what was going on. We're like, what are you talking? What is going on? And so they were trying to pretend like they had this smoking gun, and they clearly never did.
So, the one thing it makes me think of, Christina, is that I just don't think that many people were surprised. I mean, surely the president and the people around him realized that once they stole the 2020 election, they were going to make up whatever they could, and they were going to come for him in every way possible.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And I think I can say I felt that way as well. Raiding Mar-a-Lago, to me, like how, no. That, you can make up charges. You can make up, they made up the January 6th stuff. You can make up the mortgage fraud, the bank fraud stuff. Okay. Raiding Mar-a-Lago? To me, honestly, I did not think they would go that far. I did not expect something that egregious. But
what about
and then it got worse.
What about what people say that they raided Mar-a-Lago because they were looking for records. They knew that Trump had records of their crimes in 2016, 17, 18, 19. I mean, still for the seditious Russia collusion conspiracy that's still going on today. And all of the related crimes to that. And they wanted to see what documents he had, or they wanted to get those documents. Is there any truth to that?
It's plausible. The way they were conducting themselves was very odd, in my opinion. And they, like I said, they didn't have probable cause, and then they wouldn't allow me to observe exactly what they were doing. I had to stand outside the rooms. They wouldn't let me inside the rooms to see what they were doing.
And is that normal?
Kind of. I mean, I don't know what's normal when you're raiding a president's home. So nothing to me was normal. It's not abnormal for them to say to lawyers, hang on, we're not going to let you stand over our shoulder. So that in and of itself, I don't think was that far-fetched. But the way they were going about everything, I said to them, I go, what you're doing looks very suspicious. It looks very fishy. And they didn't care.
How did they react to you?
It was pretty contentious at first. And then, I was standing out there, I want to say 8 to 10 hours, 8, 9, I don't know exactly what it is, but for a long time. And eventually, you kind of calm down and developed some level of rapport, but it was never good. It was always pretty hostile and contentious throughout the whole time.
You got to wonder about these agents that are going along with things that they
every
know
single
are
one
wrong.
of them.
They should be fired, right?
Yeah, 100%. And both the Florida and the DC teams, FBI, DOJ attorneys, they all need to go. And I can tell you, and I've got all the stories in the book, but these were not people that were just following orders or just doing their job. That is not what was happening.
Why do you say that?
Because of the way they were acting and the way they were carrying themselves and the fact that they did not have probable cause. Now, unless these were fresh recruits, straight out of Quantico that had just learned how to be FBI agents, which even then I'm not sure is, forgivable. They had to have known they did not have probable cause. They did not have a legitimate reason for doing this. And they should have had a check in their gut going, before we go raid a president's home, let's make sure that this is right. And there's no way they possibly could have had all those checks in place. So, I believe they all should have refused to follow that order. It probably would have cost them their jobs. Maybe it would, I don't know, maybe they would have gotten transferred.
Or maybe if they all did it, it wouldn't cost them their jobs. Maybe if everybody, because how many agents were involved?
A few dozen, maybe 3 dozen.
Yeah, so
2 to 3 dozen, yeah.
If all of them say, hey, wait a minute, let's have a meeting about this. Do we have probable cause here? Then you're not going to lose your job. People act like they're so powerless. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. People have, especially people in government who are in these types of positions, they have to start taking a closer look at what they're being asked to do and say no when it's not appropriate.
Don't they take an oath?
They do. They do take an oath. Yeah.
And that oath is supposed to be binding, not just morally and ethically.
Yeah, I think where it gets confusing for them, for government, I'm just kind of thinking here, but I think they get between protecting the United States and taking an oath to the United States and taking an oath to a political party. Because you have a lot of political activists that I think they genuinely believe that they're doing the right thing. I had the opportunity to interact with a lot of U.S. attorneys or assistant U.S. attorneys and, DOJ attorneys that were investigating all the Jackson. I got sucked into the January 6th case. I got sucked into the Mar-a-Lago case. I got hauled before Congress for the J6 committee. I mean, I was involved in all of it. And I met several DOJ attorneys along the way that were trying to throw me in prison for the rest of my life. And some of them, I actually think they believed they were doing the right thing. They weren't. They were wrong. They had no probable cause. They had no reason to believe a crime had been committed. But in their twisted, religion of wokeism, I think some of them actually believed they were doing the right thing.
I mean, what was it like dealing with those people when it came to the very, very obvious political bias? Did you raise that with them?
Yeah, not directly. I mean, a lot of that is arguments you raise to the court, right? So when I was getting interrogated and interviewed and the grand jury, those aren't really great places to make that argument. But, I did my best to kind of let it be known. It was probably easiest in when I was getting interrogated by DOJ and the FBI, and that was more just like a conversation. So yeah, I kind of mentioned it there, but at that point, everybody knew, like I knew, or I believed they were prosecuting the president and targeting me for my political beliefs and my political affiliations. They knew I believed that. And so like,
you didn't need to have the conversation.
Yeah,
it was understood.
We all know.
Yeah. And how bad is the DOJ? I mean, in terms of bias and deep state operatives, I mean, because, I've talked to people on the inside who say it was pretty much 98% political operatives for the other, for the leftist side. And that's maybe down to 60%, but not, even that, it's a generous estimate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I only interacted with the ones that were trying to throw me and my colleagues and my friends in prison. So to me, it seemed like everybody's against us. So I don't have the data or whatever, but there's something about the Department of Justice where when the attorneys get there, they genuinely believe they have a moral superiority.
That's called elitism. It's the same in the media.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And they genuinely believe they're morally superior. So if we have a disagreement, it used to be, we have a disagreement, I'm just better than you. It's gotten so bad now that if we have a disagreement, you're a criminal. And that clearly can't be correct. And I say that I'm still a criminal defendant today, right? Like that case is still happening in Arizona.
Which case in Arizona? Can you explain that?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the case in Arizona?
Yeah, so I've been indicted. Well, I was indicted. The indictment's been thrown out with Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Boris Epstein, Mike Roman, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting a few others, plus the 11 electors from Arizona. We were indicted as part of the alternate electors conspiracy that all of these states alleged that these electors were doing something illegal by creating the alternate slate in 2020. All of it was done for the purpose of preserving an opportunity for Donald Trump to cast his slate of electors should he be successful in challenging those states. The law requires those ballots, the electors' ballots, to be cast on December 14th. And there were still several states, that Arizona being one of them, that had open litigation and, they weren't really sure what the results were going to be in Arizona. And so in order to comply with the law, the electors had to create a Trump ballot that could be used in the event he was successful in his litigation. And the Arizona Attorney General, along with, I want to say 4 other states, decided that was illegal. It's not illegal defined by the law. They just announced it to be illegal. And since they didn't have a crime to charge us with, they created one. They said it was a conspiracy to commit forgery. And they charged us all, I think 9 felonies.
Wow.
And not only is it not illegal, it's been done before. It happened in the John F. Kennedy in 1960, the election. He contested the state of Hawaii, and so they had to create an alternate slate in Hawaii in 1960. He contested that state. It was against Richard Nixon, and he ended up winning, and Kennedy ended up using the alternate slate of electors. So this has all been done. There's precedent for all of it.
This is what's called lawfare. This is how they weaponize the justice system against the American people. They want to intimidate the attorneys and candidates and voters and everybody and get you just to go along with and accept the result no matter what, because anything, if you tried to question it in any way whatsoever, they will find a way to criminalize that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And they're going after the attorneys, as you mentioned. That's a great point. They're trying to disbar all of the attorneys who are demonstrating a willingness to push back. I mean, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Jeff Clark, Ken Chesborough, the list goes on. Yeah, they tried. Thankfully, they admitted there was no wrongdoing on my part. So I got to keep my licenses, which thank you, by the grace of God. But they're just trying to disbar anybody who will push back. And the problem that creates is then there's nobody to defend anyone with conservative values. Yeah. Because they're either too scared to fight because they're like, I've got a family, I've got a business, I can't afford to have them attack me, so I'm not going to fight. Or everybody who can fight has lost their license. So I think there's a real significant problem in these professional licensing organizations like state bar associations, state medical boards, state, psychology boards, all of these boards and bars that oversee these professions are so left-leaning that it's choking out, normal citizens who want to express themselves conservatively, or want to have alternative choices for medicine or whatever it is, and they're trying to choke out that option by choking out the professionals who defend that viewpoint. And
that's another tactic. That's by design. Yeah. And it applies to the media too. It's kind of like self-censorship, right? Is that if I know that if I pursue a particular story, or that I'm going to, not only am I not going to be rewarded or recognized or thanked for my work, but I'm going to be targeted and punished. Well, why would I pick that story? Or why would I bother to defend something that I know I'm just going to lose, and then I'll just do something else. And that's what's happened. That's what you've seen over time. And the effect has been that there's nobody in the media that wants to, in most of the legacy and mainstream media, there's no one that wants to stand up and say, hey, you know what? Maybe this policy from Trump, maybe the tariffs and resetting the balance of trade is not the worst idea, because look at what's been happening and look what the effect is, and look at the negative impact of that imbalance. And no, you're not allowed to do that, right? So they just move on and let's do something else, because that's called self-censorship. That's how you preserve yourself. So, Christina, one thing I'm curious about, though, is when you say they're going after lawyers, who do you mean by they?
Well, I meant liberals, but there are certain organizations, I think it's called the 65 Project or
run
something
by
like
Michael
that.
Teeter.
Yeah, the whole purpose is to disbar attorneys who represented Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that was the brainchild of David Brock from Media Matters for America and Norm Eisen. Right? The two of them got together and decided to create that organization, and they picked Michael Teeter, an attorney out of Utah, to run it. And they systematically targeted attorneys, went after their law license. And by the way, why do we even why do you need a bar? You go to college, you learn how to practice law. Why do you need a bar certification?
I would probably lean closer to agreeing with you now. I mean, the traditional answer is, you want to protect the public from people who really aren't qualified, or who, could unintentionally harm the public through, malpractice or whatever. But it's getting to the point where these bars are putting so much pressure on conservatives that conservatives can't practice anyway. And to your point about Norm Eisen being part of this organization, creating this organization, he also created another organization called States United Democracy Center, which is assisting in all of the prosecutions of the electors, of the Trump electors in all of the states, not just in Arizona, but in Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, all the places where they're still to this day, those cases are all open. The Fani Willis case is open. Everybody thinks it's gone. It is not. The media is just not reporting on it anymore. They're all still coming after us. And that's all the brainchild of these, staunch liberals.
And the issue here is that these are state cases, right? So that's nothing that, in theory, there's not a whole lot the federal government can do about it. That's why Tina Peters is still in jail.
Exactly. That Colorado's another one. Yeah. And then Fannie Willis is a district attorney. So that's just at the county level. That's not even a state. That's at the county.
That's crazy.
And it's causing so much harm.
And can you explain who Norm Eisen is?
Norm Eisen is a liberal lawyer. He was Obama's ethics czar. I believe he was on the House Judiciary Committee, or he was on one of the committee staff when they impeached Donald Trump first or second time, and was, co-counsel for one of Trump's impeachments. He's kind of a well-known liberal attorney who is running around in all of these circles, and he starts their nonprofits. They say they're bipartisan. They find rhino Republicans that want to participate with them, and so they get Republicans in all of these groups and call themselves bipartisan and create all these groups, and then go prosecute conservatives, try to disbar conservatives. I mean, they wage lawfare. I mean,
and Norm Eisen is an absolutely public, avowed hater of Donald Trump.
Oh, yes. He's very open about it.
Yeah, he's very open about it. He's aligned himself with that horrible woman, Jennifer Rubin, and they've got an awful show. And anyone can look up Norm Eisen and see him spewing hatred towards Trump. He also took over Crew, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, right? He and David Brock was there before him, and they just take these supposedly bipartisan organizations and turn them into progressive assassins, right?
Yeah.
They're like hitmen.
Yeah, that's the great way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they really don't care who they destroy in the process, which is kind of ironic, because then, you get something like the John Bolton raid happens, and suddenly all these people that were defending the raid against Trump are now against the raid on John Bolton and trying to say, oh, look, it's the same thing. But from your knowledge and experience, can you speak to what's different about these two situations?
Yes. I love this topic because I just love it. No, it's not the same. So the raid on Mar-a-Lago was also in the morning, the same way the Bolton raid was, but they didn't use lights and siren. They didn't use any of that. They didn't announce publicly anything. They go through the whole property where they're looking for 8 or whatever hours. Don't announce anything. Everybody's very quiet. And it wasn't until Donald Trump himself put out on Truth Social that Mar-a-Lago was being raided that anybody knew anything was happening. And that was in the evening. I want to say that was like 7 or 8 at night by the time he put that out. They didn't say anything about it. And then for 3 days, they go, oh my goodness, the Biden White House. Oh my goodness, Mar-a-Lago was raided. That's crazy. We had no idea. We have no idea who did that,
Which was a total lie.
Of course it's a lie. They played stupid for 3 days. Christopher Wray never said anything. And it wasn't until Merrick Garland, 3 days later on August 11th, the raid was on August 8th. On August 11th, Merrick Garland does a little press conference. The entire press conference lasted about 3 minutes. It was so short. And he gets up and basically takes responsibility. It wasn't even, you should come out and be like, look at all this great information we got. We're saving the world. We're saving democracy, whatever their stupid talking points are. No, he didn't do that. He came out like an impish little jester and took responsibility for the raid and then slinked off stage, and everyone's going, what the heck? So why did you do it? Why did you raid Mar-a-Lago? And they never said anything about it. The thing about the Bolton raid that was so exciting to me was Kash Patel came out Friday morning, the day they were raiding it, and said, no one is above the law. He took ownership of it. And then the FBI put out a statement saying something to the effect of, we have a warrant, we have all the proper paperwork. We're executing a raid on John Bolton's home. So Kash Patel and the FBI as a whole took responsibility, took ownership of this the morning that it was happening. They didn't wait for John Bolton to cry about it. They didn't wait for the left to lose their minds. They said, we have what we need and we are on good ground. And that leads me to believe that they have probable cause that something happened and that they're not concerned at all about what they know is going to be a lot of scrutiny about why they did this once they actually... Exactly. And they're not worried about it because they were very confident in taking ownership of this. So I was really encouraged to see that the way it was conducted was very different from the way they conducted Mar-a-Lago.
Okay. And now obviously people make this very, to me, a mindless, superficial, dishonest comparison and say, okay, they went after Trump because of classified information, and they're going after John Bolton for the same thing. But of course, John Bolton leaked classified information. This is completely different to being the commander in chief and the president of the country, because the president of the country, as the commander in chief, is the only person who the act of speaking is an act of declassification, right? I mean, so Trump wasn't accused of leaking classified information, which they know he cannot leak it. And John Bolton was. So can you speak to some of how they're blurring the lines and what the difference is there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. President Trump was not accused of leaking classified information. And you can go back and look at his indictment. None of it is leaking. None of it is, hey, he exposed national secrets. None of that. It was all mishandling and obstruction of justice. Mishandling meaning with the FBI. It's all obstruction of justice. Basically, if the FBI or Department of Justice had never opened a criminal investigation into Donald Trump, there would be no crimes to charge, because all of them, I think there was like 39 counts. Every single one of them was some form of obstruction of justice. You interfered with our investigation.
Some form of process crime that they created.
Exactly. They're normally like little throwaway add-ons to a larger crime. But here, there was no larger crime. That is not the case with John Bolton. Leaking information, sending things outside, proper channels, taking information with you that you're not supposed to take when you leave. Those are actual crimes. Those are not process fouls. So they're not the same.
So, of course, the president is allowed to take, by law, is allowed to take classified files with him when he leaves office. Every president. John Bolton, in his position, is absolutely under no circumstances not allowed to do that. And neither, by the way, was Joe Biden as vice president. It's literally the law applies only to the president. Is that right?
Yes, you're right. And to make matters worse, when Joe Biden took when Joe Biden took documents as a senator, he was not even as vice president. He took them as a senator. That was illegal. And so they effectively prosecuted Donald Trump for the crimes that Joe Biden committed. Donald Trump was not guilty and was not even conceivably guilty of this in any conceivable way. Joe Biden was.
Yeah.
And so they just prosecuted Donald Trump for the crimes they knew Joe Biden committed. I mean, Robert Hur even basically said, what he did was wrong, but he's too senile to stand trial, so we'll just keep letting him run the country.
Yeah, Robert Hur was, he was the author, the Inspector General, right, who did that report, did the investigation into him, which was quite extraordinary when the media was trying to pretend that Biden was, fully functional and cognizant and actually running things. And then the Inspector General comes out and says he's not. And they still continue to lie about it.
So, that's exactly right. And the whole Robert Hur appointment was, it was a cover-up. They had to do it. They didn't want that story to come out. They were trying to keep it quiet. I don't know what happened there. I'm curious. I wish I could see, a little bit behind the scenes on the left, because it was actually the leftist media that exposed it.
That's called controlling the narrative in information warfare. When you know that something is going to come out, and so you put it out, because then you can frame it in your own terms and control it as much as possible.
I do think that's true, but I only the left had it. I don't think to my knowledge anyway, I don't think anybody on the right had the information. It seemed to me a little bit like some folks on the left were trying to get rid of Joe Biden.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
I don't know, but I watched that and I was like, it was clearly an infight between everybody on the left. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, none of us knew that had happened. So thanks for letting us know. But what are you doing with it? So I thought that was really interesting to me.
Christina, can you, it's sort of unusual, Trump has a number of interesting attorneys, Alina Habba being one of them. And of course, people have forgotten all about the information operation against him in the first term, where it was, Trump was the woman hater. And yet the man is surrounded by sort of, smart, powerful, accomplished women in very significant jobs from, not Pam Bondi is there,
Susie Wiles.
Yeah. Susie Wiles is one of them. And there's a plethora of them. And there were in the first administration too. So how did you end up, I know you were born in Michigan, grew up in Arizona, but how did you this this relatively young woman? How old are you now?
42.
Okay, 42. I wish I was 42. I loved my 40s, but okay. So how did you end up in quite a formidable position?
Yeah. It really was the shaking of the 2020 election. When all of that chaos was kind of happening, his lawyers were running for the hills. I mean, the lawyers that he had in place at that time, a lot of people were abandoning the president. And for a while, it's easy to forget because most of America, I think, stayed with President Trump. But the political operatives and, the kind of DC people that had been arguably serving the president, a lot of them were really worried. They were worried about, getting indicted, getting like everything that eventually did happen. They were all worried about it. And so none of them wanted to really be in the fight. And of course, that's not true for Rudy. Rudy Giuliani was like leading the charge. And so I got in touch with Rudy.
He's amazing.
Just out of concern for the president. And I said, I'm an attorney. I'm happy to help however I can. At the time, I was working as a reporter. And I had done some interviews with Rudy, so that's how I was connected with him. And I was like, hey, whatever you need, like, I'm happy to use my legal skills to help you. And then, I was volunteering with Rudy, and then I eventually, about a year or two later, joined the president's legal team. But it really just was because, when the what hits the fan, and everybody left, it kind of created a space for that I ended up stepping into.
So let's be clear on a couple of things. The 2020 election was stolen.
Yes.
And
it's so funny like that you say that, because do you remember when it was like taboo to say that?
That's why I like to say it.
Yeah. Now it's like, well, obviously it was stolen. Like, do you actually think Joe Biden was the most popular president in U.S. history?
Come on.
Like, you have to be willfully ignorant to believe that.
Yes, or paid, or somehow, or corrupted, or politically motivated. But for the average person out there who's still clinging to this idea that Joe Biden actually won the 2020 election, I mean, I feel bad for you, because you're light years behind when it comes to facing reality. And do you think, Christina, that there's going to be any accountability for that?
I hope so. I really do. I think there needs to be. And I think that's kind of a marker of the Trump administration. I think what they do with the Justice Department and kind of recalibrating justice to be real justice, not conservative versus liberal justice.
Exactly.
But just actual justice.
Right.
I think that's his biggest milestone that he needs to lay. This administration is reestablish justice, recalibrate it, and then bring accountability for the 2020 election, before elections in general, like clean out our election process so that the American people can be confident that we actually are in control of our government. Because I think a lot of people question at this point, are we actually in control of our own government?
Well, that's the point there, right? How does he do that when every single agency, whether it's Department of Defense, Department of Justice, the NSA, the FBI, I mean, as you go along, they're filled with hardcore operatives. And, one of the big differences that I've been looking into this time around is that in 2016, they were so confident that with the cheat that they had in place, that they expected Hillary to win. And they encountered some resistance there that they didn't anticipate. And, they were caught by surprise when Donald Trump...
They believed their own polls.
They believed their own fake polls, engineered polls. Yeah, quite incredible. And so... you had a lot of people that were in these institutions who maybe were lifelong bureaucrats, that leaned left or, that were registered Democrats and so on. But what appears to have happened during the Biden administration is they staffed these agencies with hardcore operatives. So now it's not just the career civil servant that's been there a long time and doesn't really like Republicans very much and leans Democrat. Now it's the people that are dug in for a real fight. Because they know that the battle lines have been drawn. In 2016, most of us had absolutely no idea they could steal an entire election. And all the other arms, all the other lines of operation that have now become clear, where they're going to take your kids and mutilate them medically for life, where they're going to target parents for standing up for their kids. Now that they're going to open the border and let in 20 million people illegally, and they're going to trash your cities and trash your institutions and trash your families. We didn't understand all of this. Yeah. There were people who did, but it wasn't as widespread, the understanding. We didn't, after living through COVID, people now see that doctors were willing to, torch the Hippocratic Oath and send you to your death. They were people were willing to let elderly people die of accelerated dementia out of loneliness. And force an experimental medication on people when there was a perfectly treatable options in place, right? And they had to deny that. So we hadn't experienced all of this. But now when you look at it and you understand that these agencies have been staffed with people who are there as operatives, not to serve the interests of justice, regardless of party. They are there for political reasons, and they're willing to go down, fighting to the end. So how do you deal with that as Donald Trump?
I think you get rid of the agencies. I think that's why he got rid of the Department of Education. And I think, I say get rid of the agencies somewhat flippantly, but I mean it too. At the very least, these agencies need to be shrunk. We shouldn't be giving so much authority to bureaucrats, whether they're political operatives or not. I think it cripples the states when we're relying so much on the federal government for things. So get rid of the agencies. And people go, oh, can you get rid of the FBI? I'm not advocating to get rid of the FBI, but shrink it. And do I think America would fall apart if we didn't have the FBI? No.
Well, you have Homeland Security investigations. You have HSI.
How many federal law enforcement agencies do we need? And why do they have to be federalized? Why can't we give those resources to the various states and allow all of the states to be doing that?
I don't know, because you end up with sanctuary states where they're not implementing the law at all.
Well, we already have that. So, at least we wouldn't have that and a crazy federal law. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But no, I think the size of the federal government needs to be shrunk a lot, because
dramatically.
Yeah, because of exactly what you just described.
Well, and then we haven't even touched on the intelligence agencies and agencies like the NSA that have been, pretty much overtaken by radicals, really. And also, then what about the elephant in the room, the rhinos?
That is connected to our elections, right? Because I think the Rhino Party doesn't serve. I think the American people recognize at this point that the Rhino Party does not actually serve any of the constituents. You have some old school Republicans that are like, no, I like the way things have always been done. But I think most people who are paying attention now don't like the rhinos. The only way we can get rid of rhinos is to have free and fair elections and vote them out. And at the end of the day, if we have free and fair elections and, you still have rhinos left in certain states, that's who the people picked, So
who poses the greater threat to President Trump right now? Does it come from his own party, from the rhinos, or does it come from the left, or are they equally? Well, they're working together.
Well, I would say, use the word threat. Who poses the bigger threat? I would say Democrats are a bigger threat as far as like weaponizing something with him. But I think Republicans are a bigger obstacle. He would be able to get more done if Republicans weren't in his way. But I do think Democrats are doing all kinds of...
He's being obstructed by both, right? There are people on the Republican side who are stalling him as much. Look at the Senate on appointments. Yeah. What on earth is happening with appointments? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. They're stalling him on appointments. They're not implementing his policy decisions that he wants. Americans have I think, raised their voices pretty loud saying we want clean elections, we want free and fair elections. And the Republican House and Republican Senate have done nothing to bring that about. Donald Trump has said, I want to get rid of mail-in ballots. And I applaud his EO. I think it's great that he did an EO about mail-in ballots. The reason he had to do an EO is because the Republican House and Senate didn't do anything
which is outrageous, which means if you've got the Republicans in control of the House and Senate and it doesn't happen, it means it'll never happen.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Democrats, the only way Democrats win is with mail-in ballots. They would not win without them. And
machines.
Sadly, I think
both.
What was that?
And machines, right? And voting machines, because the digital machines enable the cheat to happen on a massive scale.
Yeah, and I think having mail-in ballots makes it easier to cheat with machines to the extent it happens.
They work
the
together.
Mail-in ballots are the receipts, right?
They work together. You need because they know in advance from the computers and from the AI what they need to cheat. So part of creating those fake ballots that they need is the mail-in ballots.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, getting rid of mail-in ballots would make it harder. There's two things. If we only do two things, which should be very, very easy for the House and Senate to do, is to say in a federal election, no mail-in ballots, and you count the ballots at the precincts. Because once they move to these centralized vote facilities where all of the votes are counted at one arena, I mean, you only need one or two people to cheat for the entire state, and you can steal the whole state. If you reverse that, 10, 15, whatever years ago, where not even, God, time flies. Yeah. About 10 years ago, where all of the stuff was counted at the precinct level, it's much harder to cheat because you can have 2,500 precincts in a state or in a county. And that means you need 2,500 people to cheat in order to manipulate those ballots. And so if they just get rid of mail-in ballots and they make the counting at the precinct level, like our elections are going to be pretty close to clean. And that leaves out the whole debate about the machines. People are going to debate machines or not, till the cows come home. But if you just get rid of mail-in ballots and go back to precinct counting, cheating any other way is going to be real hard.
Well, and I would add getting rid of the machines because I still, the biggest issue still is that nobody reads code. So nobody can validate those results.
Yeah.
So all of your election workers, all of those people that are present who are saying, everything was above board, they have no idea.
Yeah. And that's why you need the paper ballots to be able to confirm the results.
Yeah, but what they do, they take that paper ballot, they put it in a machine, you get a barcode, and they say, okay, yeah, but you don't know if that barcode reflects your vote.
100%. And that was the problem in Georgia. And the judge in Georgia said, this isn't constitutional. And everyone went, oh, well. Wait, what?
Oh, well.
So, yeah.
What about one of the most unsettling tactics that I'm witnessing right now, that I've been talking to people about and investigating, is I would describe it as stalling, right? Whether it's undermining, it's slow rolling, call it whatever you like. But what you see is that the president, there are too many people around the president and in these agencies who are slow rolling him on all kinds of things. If you look at this point in not even the Biden administration, in the Trump administration, the first time around, Mueller was already investigating the president. He was investigating the national security advisor, Trump's own national security advisor. He had, how many attorneys did he have working for him? How many prosecutors? How big was his staff? I mean, as I understand it, you've got Ed Martin, who's got two people working for him, two attorneys working for him or prosecutors, and Judge Jeanine hasn't even been confirmed yet in her role. So who's actually investigating from the Department of Justice's side and from the FBI side? Where are the big teams of people that are investigating what happened during this seditious Russia collusion conspiracy that was carried out not just against the president and the Trump administration, but against the American people? Where are the teams of people doing that? Where are the subpoenas from the Judiciary Committee? Where are the investigations? I mean, the January 6th Select Committee was already, well on its way at this point in the Biden administration. It seems like and I know that the Tulsi Gabbard and the DNI's office did a huge investigation into Russia collusion. I'm not stupid. It's a Title 50 investigation, very significant because it involved treason and sedition. So that's huge, but they can't do it. They're not a prosecuting authority. They can do the investigation. They need the FBI and the DOJ to do their part. Where is it?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think you're right. But I think that is the heavy lift of this administration. And Pam Bondi's at the tip of the spear on that, is cleaning out the Department of Justice and where they're having, you raise two stall issues, both of which are valid, where you have the career bureaucrats within DOJ who are muddying the waters and making it difficult. And that's where Pam Bondi and her team need to kind of figure out who those people are and get rid of them. And then you have on the other side, the Senate and, the failed confirmation, or I shouldn't say failed, but the stalled confirmations and the ability for the president to use the people that he wants to use to do these investigations. We see them fighting over whether he can appoint Alina Habba or not.
It's ridiculous.
They're fighting. They're fighting his appointments on everything. And when I say they, I'm including Republicans on that. So, if people think, oh, this is a Democrat versus Republican fight, it is not. It's easier to describe it that way, and I am guilty myself of kind of parsing it that way. But we need to make sure, and everyone, and I'm sure all your viewers already understand, but it really is a American people versus political class. That really is the fight that we're having, and that includes Republicans as well.
And what are the consequences for President Trump? Because if he doesn't get this done, what they did last time, it seems obvious. I'm sure it's obvious to everybody listening to this or watching it, is if President Trump doesn't hold these people accountable for their crimes, not only will they continue to carry out these crimes, but they will come for him and his family. And he's always said, this is really about the American people. I'm just standing in the way. And surely that is obvious at this point.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And they'll come for him. They'll come for all of us. They will make sure that the American people don't have another opportunity that we have right now to try to root out all the corruption. We either get it done in President Trump's term right now, or we lose our republic. We won't be able to recover from it if we don't get some key decisions and some key landmark accountability in this first term. And I think it's important to recognize that there are two ways to get us out of this mess, out of the lawfare, out of the constant attacks, out of all of that.
How?
People put a lot of pressure on Donald Trump, but there's two ways to do it. The first way is the people who abused the power in the first place could stop. They could say, you know what, we recognize we went too far. We shouldn't have attacked Donald Trump. We shouldn't have gone after his supporters. They could voluntarily take step back.
That's never going to happen.
Well, it's not happening for sure. Whether it could or no. But I think it's an important point to make, though, because when people say, oh, well, he shouldn't be doing that. Okay, fine. Well, when you back up, get off the ground you took in the Justice Department, in the criminal justice system, in the civil justice system, if you back up, we can have something closer to a truce. We still need accountability, but we don't have to have the constant fights. But it's like dealing with the schoolyard bully. Until they willingly stop, we don't have the ability to not push back. We have to push back, or we lose everything. And certainly the stakes are higher for Donald Trump.
Well, you said there were two ways. That would be one. What would be the other way?
No, the first way is they voluntarily do it.
Yeah.
And then the second way is we do it by force. Is we say, okay, well, if you're not going to voluntarily do it, then we have to prosecute you. And that's the position we're placed in. And so when people, I've done several different shows on this recently, and some of the leftist shows I've been on say, well, Christina, isn't it unfair that, he shouldn't be going after his political opponents? Excuse me, I am still a criminal defendant right now. So until you stop coming for me, I'm not going to stop coming for you. Lay your weapons down. Leave the American people alone. Leave Donald Trump alone. And until you do, we can't stop. So I think it might seem like a silly point because we all know that, they're not going to stop. But it's important to recognize that is a possibility.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. It is a very important point. Isn't it also important because when you look at this as a seditious conspiracy, which it obviously is, the conspiracy, there are legal requirements for a conspiracy to end. So I kind of get a little bit frustrated with all these people that go on air talking about statute of limitations.
Oh, yeah.
Because the conspiracy is ongoing.
It is still ongoing. And at the very least, it didn't stop until Joe Biden was out of office. It likely is still ongoing. But the earliest they could say, if the whole, like for the 2020 election conspiracy stuff, the whole point was to keep Joe Biden in office. And so the conspiracy lasted as long as Joe Biden was in office, in my view. So no, I think you're exactly right. Whenever anybody asks me about statute of limitations, give me a break. It's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
It is still ongoing.
And on top of that, every time they go out on television, whether it's John Brennan or Comey or Schiff, every time they go out there and they lie about it and they continue to push this false idea that Trump has some kind of, Putin has some kind of sort of hold over him and is handling him and blah, blah, blah. Every time they do this, they are continuing the conspiracy and the cover-up, which is a separate crime.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They have never stopped. Every time they open their mouth on television, every time, they make an accusation that Donald Trump is a criminal, which is multiple times every single day, they're furthering a conspiracy. I mean, Adam Schiff, he goes on and is like, oh, they're using the Justice Department. He's trying to weaponize the Justice Department, and they're accusing us of, leaking classified information. And he then accuses Donald Trump or whoever. I mean, every time he makes those ridiculous arguments, he is continuing what he started 12 years ago.
So, and where does the media factor in all of this? Because you now have journalists. It's one thing to say in the beginning of the Russia collusion conspiracy, right? Back in those days, I'll be honest, not that long. I'd been working for 60 Minutes. I mean, obviously I worked at NBC, ABC, CBS for 16 years, chief foreign correspondent, one of the, full-time correspondents at 60 Minutes itself. So when you have the head of the Intel committee and you put a certain degree of credibility in that. If you've got the spokesperson for the White House or you've got senior people inside the Pentagon, at that time, you still had an obligation to check and to verify and to vet and to try to source independently. But we didn't really understand the extent to which these agencies and their representatives and elected officials were part of it. I mean, they created a narrative that was 100% false. They targeted American citizens like Carter Page. They targeted also Svetlana, the Russian woman who was set up as the honeypot at the home of a former head of MI6 in Cambridge in the UK. They targeted people like George Stephanopoulos. I mean, they lied about these people. They made up stuff and tried to. They put people behind bars who didn't deserve to be there. They literally fabricated crimes, falsified documents, and so on. And they did all of this knowingly and intentionally, and they lied under oath. I mean, there's not one thing that these people actually said under oath that appears now to have been credible, right? And so now you're still putting them on television when you know the truth.
Yeah.
And I understand there's First Amendment protections, but are you a co-conspirator in a conspiracy?
You possibly can be. And I don't know where Tulsi Gabbard's going with this or where Pam Bondi's going with it, but, we saw little rumblings recently of, there's a lot of journalists that are actually paid by the Intel community. And so,
wow.
If these are actually CIA operatives pretending to be news reporters, I would say that's part of the conspiracy. So if I were a journalist getting funds from the Intel community to work for Brennan and Clapper and all of these guys, I would be real scared. And they very well, yes, you have a First Amendment right to lie. You do. You have a right to lie on television. The news networks have the right to put out false information. I mean, all of that is constitutionally protected activity. And quite honestly, it should be constitutionally protected activity. Not that I promote lies, but you need to have a buffer that you're not going to be scared that you're going to be prosecuted or charged, civil liability or whatever. So there needs to be a buffer. So I fully support that and think it's important to preserve our First Amendment right. However, if you are using that to further a criminal conspiracy, that's not okay. That's fair game to make you a co-conspirator. So we could, I don't know what they have, and I'm not accusing any reporters of doing that, but we've heard rumblings of it. So,
Well, I talk to a lot of people who are very, very disappointed that at this point in the Trump administration, there are so few resources that appear. Now, obviously, there's a lot we don't know that's going on behind the scenes. And I refer again, the Tulsi Gabbard and the DNI's office, have fully, as I understand it, have carried out. They've been very clear that they've done a very big investigation and they've been exposing a lot. But where is, and Pam Bondi is short. She gets hammered every single day and she's got a lot on her plate. In addition to addressing the criminal issues, there's the fact that they have all these district attorneys that are backed and appointed by George Soros who have been systematically dismantling American families and societies and communities. So she's dealing with an enormous amount. And I just wonder though, where are these people? It's going to come down to Jeanine Pirro. Some of it's going to come down to Ed Martin, not as much as people think, because he's dealing with Fannie Willis and all of that. But who's dealing with the Mar-a-Lago raid, and which was another part of the seditious conspiracy, right?
It was all connected.
So who's dealing with that?
I think it's a valid question. I would say a couple things. One, it's harder for this administration to work through the Department of Justice because they have to clean it out at the same time. So I give them a little bit of grace and leeway. The other thing is, don't forget, in President Trump's first term, the media was trying to create a whole lot of smoke. And the whole point of the Mueller investigation was to create a lot of smoke. And then you had the Ukraine, and then, and it's been nothing but sensationalism coming out of the press since 2015. None of it was real. And so we have to kind of remind ourselves that like a real investigation doesn't necessarily have a whole bunch of smoke the way that it did for others, because the whole point of the other investigation was just to create the hype. And so when you're actually doing a real investigation, we might not see anything for a while. So I still think they're doing a great job. I think President Trump has clear initiatives that he wants done, particularly through the Department of Justice. And I know Ed Martin, and I think he's great. And I think a lot of the people that are working there are great. I do want to see some stuff come out too. So I totally understand that angst. I'm also kind of like, well, I don't want to jump to conclusions just because it doesn't look like what the other stuff looks like.
I agree with you completely. What concerns me is what I hear from the inside is that the president keeps asking for things to be done. For example, he's written his executive orders and they're not being implemented, and people are not saying no, but they're slowing everything down. So in some cases, it's not happening at all, and that bothers me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right.
Because, for example, there isn't an obvious campaign today like they made, that they created like there was last time. But tying the president up in this Ukraine war, which is ridiculous, dragging it out. So now he's forced to be funding something he doesn't want to be funding, which, by the way, many of his voters do not want him to be funding, right? And so that's tying him up. So they're still distracting him and consuming his time with things that occupying him to prevent him addressing what really, if you look at the core issues, sure, there's 1,000 things that he has to address. But if you go to the very core of what it is, if you do not deal with accountability, it doesn't matter how many opportunity zones you create. It doesn't matter what you do with jobs. It doesn't matter what you do with the interest rate. It doesn't matter what you do with the economy or any of it. None of it is going to matter. If your elections can still be stolen and people who are guilty of treason and sedition continue to get away with it, then none of that is going to hold or be sustained.
You're exactly right. I mean, this term is crucial. We win now or we lose everything forever.
Well, Christina, we are very grateful to you. I know that your time is up. I know there are a lot of people out there, many of them scared for legitimate reasons, but if there weren't people out there who are not afraid or going to act in spite of their fear, who didn't have the courage to do what you have done, and the ability, we would be lost. We would really be lost. So very grateful to you for everything. We want to stay across your cases as a criminal defendant. Please keep me posted on that, because that's ridiculous. And it is a very significant indicator that they're not gone. Nobody has surrendered. Nobody has quit. Nobody's gone away. They're going to stall and wait this out and drag it out, but they still have every intention of coming for every American who stands in their way and anyone who supports the agenda of the American people that President Trump is trying to implement. So thank you again so much, and you take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so please remember to like, share, subscribe, get as many people as you can to watch Going Rogue with Lara Logan. We're always grateful to anyone who is brave enough to go rogue, and spread the word. We can't do this without you.